Rabbi Yehuda Kalman Marlow was born on Yud Adar Rishon 5692, 1932, in Frankfurt, Germany, to Reb Avram Yehoshua and Rachel. His mother Rachel was descended from a well-known chain of rabbis. First among them was the great Gaon Reb Hershel, Av Beis Din of the Jewish community in Krakow, Poland. Despite his difficult financial situation, Reb Avram Yehoshua sent his young son to learn in Yeshivas Torah V'Das, where he was first introduced to Chabad Hasidus through Rabbi Shalom Dov Ber Gordon. Although Reb Avram Yehoshua was not a Chassid, he admired the Hasidic lifestyle, and when the Rebbe Rayatz came to the U.S., he went with the Hasidim to the Rebbe's Farbrengen. Over the years, Reb Avram Yehoshua participated in the Rebbe Rayatz's Farbrengens on a number of occasions, and twice had Yechidus with the Rebbe. Sometimes he would take his son along so that he could breathe the Hasidic atmosphere in the Rebbe's court. Since young Bechorim were not allowed to participate in the Farbrengens, young Rabbi Marlow had to hide. Rabbi Marlow married Chaya Reicher on Daled Adar 5719 and merited that the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach was Mesader Kedushin. Shortly after his marriage, he started teaching during the morning hours in the Lubavitch Yeshiva, while in the afternoon he would study until late at night. Even before he was elected as Rav, many people would ask him questions in halacha, and he would answer them modestly, sometimes even learning with them that subject in Shulchan Aruch. After the Rav in Crown Heights, Rabbi Dvorkin, passed away, the Rebbe urged that there should be elections for a Beis Din of 3. Rabbi Marlow was elected as one of 3 Rabbanim. In Tafshin Mem Zayin, Rabbi Marlow, along with other Rabbanim, wrote a psak din that Mashiach must come immediately, which was then handed to the Rebbe. After Gimel Tammuz Tafshin Nun Daled, Rabbi Marlow continued his firm kach in Mashiach in general and identifying the Rebbe as Melech HaMashiach specifically. In this documentary, friends and family, along with some of Rabbi Marlow's students, will share their personal encounters with him to help shed some light on the life of this silent hero.
Throughout the years, I recall many people calling my house. The phone was ringing constantly. As a matter of fact, my mother, Salange Yoden, recalls a story how one day she receives a call from a goy who wants to know, who is this famous person? Who is this person who receives calls constantly at all hours of the night, at the wee hours of the night? Seemingly, I think there was a listing, either like a tzach listing that had a mistake in a digit, which is a whole separate Hayron of Eidos Hashem, 1 digit off, and seemingly a lot of wrong calls were going to him. So he just wanted to know, who is this person? At any rate, he received a lot of calls, specifically from those who, I guess, would want to relate to someone younger or someone who speaks English, or whatever it is. And he did receive a lot of calls then, and a lot of shilas, but he never wanted to consider himself officially Rav. He just pushed himself aside. If someone asked him a question, he would show the answer or say the answer, but he never pushed himself or never tried to be a ganze macher. In general, b'chlal, especially then. I recall in the summer of Tafshin Lamed Zayin, we were in Gan Yisrael, Parksville. Why were we in Gan Yisrael, Parksville? Because my father was teaching then in Turkey. Not in Turkey wasn't in Parksville, but it was Siberia and Turkey. Siberia was Al-Ataida's section, one side of the camp, and Turkey was Lubavitch Yeshiva section on the other side of the camp. They had those names, and we were in quote-unquote Turkey, and I was learning with my father, and suddenly we're visited by 2 Eltere Chassidim, Reb Zalman Garari and Reb Shmuel David Reichik, Aleichem Hashalom. And they asked to speak to my father. They called my father. My father excused himself, and he had a conversation with them. Exactly what the conversation was, I don't know, but the toichin of it was, my father told me afterwards, that they asked him to officially take shilas or do rabbonis in the afternoon as part of Vad Rabban Lubavitch, etc. So from then on, instead of teaching in the afternoon, he became involved in rabbonis in a more official capacity. And Din Toidas, even though he did Din Toidas earlier as well, but it became more official as part of Vad Rabban Lubavitch. So it started, I guess, in a more official capacity in Tavshan Lamed Zayin onward. I recall when I was a child of 5 years old, Sukkah's Tavshan Lamed. There was the Rebbe's Fabrengen in a Sukkah, and just to give a description how it was, we were able to walk around or run around the back of the Sukkah, so only 3/4 of the Sukkah was full. And at one point, I heard someone saying that a table fell down, something collapsed, and someone got hurt. And I didn't make much of it. Several minutes later, however, I saw someone carrying my father on his shoulder. Rabbi Leibel Mochkin, Olav Shalom, was carrying my father on his shoulder. So I quickly put two and two together, and I said, "Oh, what's going on over here?" And I saw that they brought him out of the sukkah and they put him down, and he attempted to walk. They asked him how he's doing, and he went like this, and he attempted to walk, and he really couldn't. And they ended up taking him in the car. This was Matzoi, the second day of Sukkot, so it was Chalamoid Sukkot by then. And he went to the hospital. That was the beginning of a long episode with his foot, with the parsha and his foot. How did this happen? Interestingly, actually, this was a Fabrengen, and the Rebbe was discussing a question. The question was, how is it that according to Minig Chabad, one is mahader to drink water in a sukkah when al pidin one could drink out of the sukkah, yet al pidin one must sleep in the sukkah, yet al pi Minig Chabad we're mahader, we're particular not to sleep in the sukkah. How does that make sense? And the Rebbe addressed it. The Rebbe went to a whole explanation, and in the middle, the Rebbe said, whoever preoccupies himself in matters of sleep is tantamount to sleeping. So the Rebbe said we should sing a very lebedik niggun, wake up the oilam, and the very lebedik niggun ensued, and that's when the platform collapsed on my father's foot. And there were additional complications to my father's foot. It was fractured in 4 places, and I'm imagining that part of the complication happened as a result of people trying to make a seder, and everyone wanted to push everyone out of the way to help others, and one of the people they were pushing out of the way, my father told me, was my father, and while he had his foot trapped under the platform. So I'm sure it didn't help matters. I was told later by Chassidim that during this whole episode my father remained silent in front of the Rebbe with absolute derech eretz, which is his character, which was very characteristic of my father's hanhogas. Yet, throughout this entire parasha, I recall how my father was consistent, how he was very motivated in doing whatever needed to be done, notwithstanding the challenges. And this was the common thread that I recall throughout his entire life. How challenges and opposition and things that were complicated and complex didn't hinder him from being connected to Avodas Hashem and his kashrus, regardless of the situation. I was told, for instance, later by one of his talmidim, that notwithstanding the fact that he had this complicated situation in the caste, he was makpid in mikveh tara. He would go to the mikveh and he would leave the foot sticking out of the mikveh. We're not going to go into the details, chatzitza, roiv, makpid, eina makpid. We're not going to go into the details, but the fact is, that shows on how he continued to do whatever had to be done without a hindrance. Later, not long after this episode, Tes Cheshvan, he lost, my grandfather passed away, so he was in Avelis, and he made sure to do whatever needed to be done, davening for the Amid 3 times a day. I remember we were walking to 770 on Shabbos. I walked with my father, and was never a question not to go to shul, even if it was Shabbos, even if it was from Empire, Brooklyn to Kingston and Eastern Parkway. He walked with the crutches and a cast to shul, to Fabrengen. It was never an issue. It was never a question. Just a very interesting detail in this episode. When the Rebbe addressed this question, the Rebbe addressed a question that happened to have been, there were those days there were questions that either Bachrim or Jungelite would pose to the Rashag and the Rebbe's brother-in-law, and the Rashag would ask the Rebbe those questions by the table. And this particular question that the Rebbe was addressing so happens to be a question that my father posed to the Rashag. Anyway, back to the situation. Once the table collapsed, the Rebbe discontinued discussing this. And I recall Mitzoi Simchas Torah. Two individuals, then two Jungelite, came to my house to pick up my father and to drive him to the Simchas Torah Fabrengen with the Rebbe. They were Baruch and Rabbi Kalman Brickman. Baruch, so lange Jahren. And they drove him to 770. I don't know what happened, or I didn't see what happened, but I did hear from Rabbi Aaron Chitrik, who actually lived in our community for the last few months of his life. He passed away in Tafshanayim Beis. So one of his Fabrengens, he told me some things about my father. One of the things he mentioned was that when my father came back, that Simchas Torah Fabrengen, they brought him up, I believe, to the side, to the back where the Rebbe was sitting with the crutches. And so first of all, the Rebbe told him to say L'chaim. And then the Rebbe continued the Sicha that he started in the Sukkos Fabrengen. So Rabbi Aaron Chitrik told me that my father said to him that now he knows two things. Number one, he felt it's the Rebbe saying Shalom Aleichem. And number two, now he knows that the Rebbe knows who asked that question. And as a matter of fact, if you see the Sicha, it's in Chelik Chav Tes, you see Besichas, Yoim Beis the Chag HaSukkos, Simchas Torah, the Shabbos Bereshis. So it was actually a three-part episode. I heard there were several rumors, specifically two rumors I heard about my father and the Rebbe. One of the rumors was that after my father broke his foot, he had a Yirah from the Rebbe to be Boki and Shulchan Aruch. And I asked my father if it in fact was true. And my father said no. So I asked him, so at what point did you start learning Shulchan Aruch? So he said, when he was a Bacher of 20, he went into Yechidus to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe asked him what he's learning, what a Seder Alimud is. So he said he's learning the Masechta, then Masechta Gittin. And the Rebbe said, how are you learning it? So he said, Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, Farshim. And then the Rebbe asked, was mit Poskim? What about Poskim? What about Shulchan Aruch, Halacha? So from then on, my father started to place a lot of emphasis on Halacha, Shulchan Aruch. And needless to say, that he mastered a lot of Halacha, a lot of Poskim, a lot of Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, we know, especially in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he knew it basically word for word. He was able to be tested, and he would be able to repeat or continue the words. Certainly, what comes to mind is like before Pesach, when my father would rest, would lie down, he would ask me to test him on the mafteches, on the contents, table of contents that the Rebbe's grandfather made for Hilchas Pesach. So basically it was a subject. Either he would say the siman, or I would say the siman and the sif, and he would tell me what the subject matter was. So that's how it started. I'm not going to address the other rumor now.
As mentioned many times, many occasions rather, to speak about someone is in the Olam HaEmes. It's a very sensitive way how to do it, One has to be very careful not to diminish from the covet from the nifter, or not to exaggerate beyond the qualities and the virtues of the nifter. Rabbi Marlow, Zechayin Levrocha, we happen to be very close colleagues, Mabdi Carelbach, was a very straight personality. Number one, was not looking forward for COVID. Number two, do not become a political rabbi for those who desire to utilize thereof in their agendas. Many times he would be sitting in his office late in the night, and many people would come to visit him for chatting and different things that would be told, and would try to get information or inspire him to do something which, according to their agendas. Many times he would be sitting and not responding silently. I admire his humbleness, but I envy his tolerance, his power to control when to talk and when not to talk. And of course, he didn't have any slight tinge even from anger. I admire his vast knowledge of halacha, especially in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. He almost knew it by heart. And he was very didactic, very scrupulous in actually and observing the halacha. But I envy his hasmada, his perseverance in his hasmada in learning. There was cases which I know he was in the office quite many hours. I think he was in the office much longer than he was at home. And people would come and discuss their different problems, or maybe discuss their way of their own philosophy, how Rabbi Marlow should behave according to the way of understanding what a Rav is. He would sit and listen, attentively or not attentively, and he would be silent. Which I believe, not because he had nothing to answer, because he was not actually accepting what was being told. And he didn't want to sit and disagree and argue. That was his attitude. Because he was a shower. If he did not agree with you, normally he would not be probably really quiet about it, or say it in such a very nice, beautiful, kind language, let's call it. Therefore, I admire his knowledge in Allah, as I said before, and his asboda was beyond the norm. I know that Friday nights he would go home 10 o'clock to get Kiddush, and he was basically learning every minute I saw him. Unless there was a din Torah, unless people came to speak with him, which he did not learn at that time. And when they would leave, even if it would be quite late in the night, he wouldn't go home. He would sit down, open, safe, and learn. I admire his devotion as a Rav in all his ramifications. But as I said before, I envy his fashion of speech, or I would say rather his silence when dealing with different people, and sometimes different occasions, and sometimes refuting accusations in a nice, kind way.
It's difficult to believe that 20 years have already passed from the Ptira of Rabbi Marlow, the Rav in our Shchuna. Rabbi Marlow was a Rav Mishichve V'mayla Gavoya, a Rav like no other Rav, a true emissary example of a Chassidish Rav. I've had many opportunities to talk to Rabbi Marlow on so many different things, matters of halacha, matters of hashkafa, personal advice. Many times I went to Rabbi Marlow to advise me on personal matters about what my shlichus is. He pushed me in the area of Rabbanis too. That's another discussion. And he was a man of very few words, but very decisive. He had his opinion, he was very clear. And the first thing in any discussion was, what does the Rebbe say about this? There was once a meeting, there were a number of Rabbanim, Askanim, Shluchim. I was there at the time too. I was a Bacher. I think I was the only Bacher in that discussion. Everybody had what to say about it. Rabbi Marlow hardly spoke. The only thing he wanted to know was, what is the Rebbe's opinion on this topic? And that's what really mattered to him. A true Emes Chassidish Rav combined both the Yiras Shamayim, which comes with the word Chassidish, and Rav, the ability to be mechaven al emes and to say the halacha, to understand that halacha is really the Ratzon Elyon. There were conversations that we had in matters of halacha. Rabbi Marlow wanted me to write up different things in halacha in his name. I recall right now there was something related to the topic of Berel, where a person goes to a Shalom Zacher and there's a bunch of quotes one on top of each other. There was an issue discussing about fax machines on Shabbos, where people from one time zone sent to another time zone. He was very clear. His opinion was, it was difficult to argue with him. This is what it was. It was very clear, very decisive. It wasn't a man of Shakla Vitaria, but he knew this was supposed to happen. He gave himself totally away to the Inyane HaKehillah. He gave himself away to the Rebbe's Ratzon. The Rebbe's Ratzon was the most important thing for him. And he was I'm not even going to talk about his Bekiyas and his Yediyah and Torah. In all Dalet Chalki Shulchan Aruch, which was something unusual, his Masris to the Inyane HaKehillah, his Yiras Shamayim, which was something unusual. Like we talk about Chassidim from Amol, Yiras Shamayim, Yachmal Atzma, it wasn't just something, or Toiv Lahachmer, or Kedai, or etc. was something which was for him, that was his way of life. And there was different chumras that he did, and no one even exactly knew why he's doing certain things, and they only discovered later it was because of a certain chumrah. Very Hatznei Aleches, not a person who really sought out his kavod, man charshmei, that wasn't even an issue for him. Like I said, what was negeh for him is, what does the Rebbe want, what's the Ratzon Elyon, what's the right thing. Rabbi Marlow is someone that we miss a lot, and his hashpah, the shchuna, it wasn't easy for him. People challenged him a lot. People made life difficult for him in some ways, but he knew this was his shlichus, this is what he's supposed to be doing, and he was here to fulfill the Rebbe's words. He was zeich that the Rebbe encouraged very much the bechidus, that at the time when he was elected as a Rav, he had special schus, and the Rebbe gave the mamad of the Rabbanim in our shchuna. The Rebbe gave us something special, a special takev. The Rebbe said that poina ni mikol asaka, I drop everything else that I'm involved in, and we know what the Rebbe's asakam are. And this is what I'm getting involved to set up the Rabbanis in this shchuna. And we see this tremendous bracha, and we see the Rabbi Marlow's inspiration is still with us today. There's a picture when you walk into the Beis Din of Crown Heights' office. There's a large picture of Rabbi Marlow, which sort of when you walk in, you right away know whose shoes you're stepping in and what you're trying to fill. These are very difficult shoes to fill. The Rebbe shall helfen that we should have a kitzav ran shoychna offer, and we'll be with him once again in our shchuna with the Gula Mitzvah Shlema taken from Yad Mamish.
Going back to Nissan Tovshin Mem Aleph, when I was a Talmud in the Yeshiva in Los Angeles, my chavrusa was my dear friend, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Marlow. At the time, I needed a place to stay in Crown Heights, and Yossi was gracious enough to invite me to stay in his home with his family. From then on, that became my home in Crown Heights. I became a Ben Bayis, like a family member, and a very deep relationship with Rav Marlow began. He became a father-like figure to me. He was my role model and mentor in Yiddishkeit, Chassidishkeit, his kashrus. As far as his personality goes, he was very witty, sharp, had a sense of humor. I'm going to talk a little bit about his hasmada. From a certain point, when he was a bacher yet, he became an outstanding masmid and an unbelievable shakton in limud HaTorah. He would learn with nerves of iron. It's well known they had a special koch in halacha, particularly in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, in which he was baki, practically word for word, Baal Peh. He would sit and study, and he had a phenomenal memory and a very deep understanding. When we speak of Kviyus Itim LaTorah, so Chassidus tells us that Kviyus Bizman is insufficient. It needs to be a Kviyus Benefesh. In my humble opinion, the perfect example of Kviyus Benefesh in Limud HaTorah was Rav Marlow. When he made a commitment, he stuck to it. I witnessed many, many times. His daily schedule: first thing in the morning, after Birchas HaShachar and Leinin Krishma Ktana and Tefillin, he would sit down to study his daily shiurim, beginning with chitas and then much more, and saying much Tillim as well. From the time of the Takana of Limud HaRambam, he would study every day the Shir Rambam the night before, at nightfall. When it came to mitzvahs, Hidur B'Kiyum HaMitzvahs, he had to do mitzvahs in the best possible way, beautify the mitzvah. Although financially he was not a wealthy man, yet when it came to mitzvahs, whatever money it took, whatever amount, is what he spent. Tzedakah as well. He gave a great amount of tzedakah, much more than people can imagine. Hashgacha Pratis, these days we're studying the Shir Rambam, is in Hilchas Sanhedrin. In Perek Beis, Halacha Zayin, the Rambam describes in detail the requirements for someone to be a member of the Beis Din. One by one. That's a description of Harav Marlow. Although he was very humble and unassuming, but yet his presence demanded respect. Aside from the fact that physically he was Mishichmoi V'mayla Gavoya, he was tall and handsome. When he walked in, his presence demanded respect. People knew when they asked a shaila or advice from Rabbi Marlow, his words were very calculated, very precise, and you felt that you got the answer of Torah. You got the psak or the advice of what the Torah is telling you to do. You felt very confident. Especially when it came to Inyani Mashiach Geula, he was a very strong supporter of the Mashiach activists, and he himself was in the forefront. Particularly after Gimel Tammuz of Tavshin Nun Dalit, when some were a bit confused and there were some doubts as to how to continue and what to continue and what to do and so on and so forth. He set the tone with his authority that we have to have absolute and complete emunah in every word that we heard and in every tnuah that we saw from Mashiach Tzidkenu. Simchas Torah of Tavshin Nun Hey, the first Simchas Torah after Gimel Tammuz Nun Dalet. So there was some degree of tension in 770, a bit of uncertainty, if you will. And right before Hakafis, Rabbi Marlow, standing on the bima near the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach's place, holding the Sefer Torah LeKabbalas Pnei Mashiach Tzidkenu, before Hakafis began, announced Yechi Adonenu Meirenu V'Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach Lo'elam Voed, with a roaring response from the entire Kahal. That moment set the tone. From then on, that we are going to continue with absolute emunah, and we will continue to bring about these galus of Melech HaMashiach. Beis Nissan, half a year later, in Tavshin Nun Hey, there was a grand Kinus Hakel in Eretz HaKodesh, the Kabbalas Pnei Mashiach Tzidkenu. Rabbi Marlow was invited to attend, which he did, which parenthetically was his first time ever in Eretz Yisrael. He came in, and he was a man of few words. He spoke very briefly, and again, he concluded his words with the proclamation of Yechi, which set the tone for all the Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael and everybody felt that we now have the stamp of approval of Torah, of halacha, because Rabbi Marlow was surely ish emes. Anyone who knew him knew that he was emes through and through. He constantly was focused on what is the Ratzon HaElyon. That's all that interested him. In the current time, in the here and the now, in this situation, what does Shulchan Aruch demand? What is the Ratzon of the Rebbe Melech HaMoshiach? And with that, he conducted himself and assisted others.
יש לי הכבוד לקבל ולכולנו את פניו של אחד מחשובי רבני חב"ד בעולם, רב קהילת חב"ד בקרון הייטס, הרב יהודה מרלו שליט"א. רב שקיבל את מינויו ואת תמיכתו של כבוד קדושת אדוננו מורנו ורבנו. ברוכים הבאים בשם השם רבנו.
כאן לחיזוק האמונה במשיח, ביאת המשיח, ושהמשיח כבר נמצא עמנו. בדרך כלל אני רוצה להודיע שאין נאומים, שאין עניינים, שאין זה המקצוע שלי. על כן אקצר, רק רציתי להביע שזכיתי שהיארצייט es קהילס Crown Heights כאן ציווה השם הברוכה הנמצאים כאן ברוח להשתתף עם כבוד הנאספים כאן בארץ אשר אין השם אלוקיך בו מראשית השנה ועד אחרית השנה ולייצג את אלו המכריזים עד מוסי וחשוב לציין שעכשיו כבר עברו עשור חדשים שמאיר על זה העניין שעד מוסי והעיקר שמסיימים בטוב שהיום כבר נסתיימו נמלאו 7 שנים שלמות שהרבי מלך המשיח הודיע לנו עדות הכרוז של יחי אני המייצג את קהילת קראון הייטס המכריזים את זה כאן בארץ הקודש רוצה לסיים בטוב יחי אדוננו מורנו ורבנו מלך המשיח לעולם ועד. תודה. יחי אדוננו מורנו ורבנו מלך המשיח לעולם ועד. יחי אדוננו מורנו ורבנו מלך המשיח לעולם ועד.
I would like to conclude with our deep hope and prayer for Hakitzu Veranenu Sheikhne Afar Vehu Beseicham Bigula Mitis Vashlema, when we'll have the fulfillment of Vashiva Sheiftenu Kivarishena Tekef Umiyad Mamish.
Rabbi Yehuda Kalman Marlow was a rare type of person and a rare type of Rav, a source of inspiration to so many. Who can forget as Bochum in 770 the sight of Harav Marlow coming in every Friday night carrying 4 talis bags full of Sfarim, sitting in the back benches of 770 and learning quietly till way after midnight, and then going home to make Kiddush. Later, when we went on Shlichus, Harav Marlow became a tremendous source of inspiration to us. He would come every Simchas Beis Sha'eva to our Chabad house, to our sukkah, and speak. Although Harav Marlow was a man of few words, when he came to visit us, I guess he felt it was a shlichus. He spoke for lengthy periods of time. I remember once when he spoke for over 40 minutes, sharing his wisdom with all in our sukkah. Another source of inspiration was that whenever we gave Harav Marlow food to eat, whether it was in Chabad house or in my personal home, whether it was flesh or chicken, he never ever asked about the Hershel. He showed us that he simply trusted in us. And for me and for my family, that was a tremendous source of inspiration. There was once a story of a group of women that had suffered tragedies with unborn children, and they came and they asked that I should bring a Lubavitcher Rav to check out the mikveh. The mikveh at the time, the Rav Amachshe was someone who would not necessarily cooperate with the Lubavitcher Rav, and so I had to bring a Rav after hours at 1:30 in the morning to check out the mikveh. I approached Harav Marlow and I asked him if he would come to check the mikveh. He said that normally he doesn't do mikvahs, I should speak to another Rav. I went to another Rav, I asked him to come and visit our mikveh, and the Rav declined. When I went back to Harav Marlow and I told him that the Rav had declined, he said to me, so what time do I have to be there? I told him at 1 or 1:30 in the morning. Harav Marlow showed up that very morning at 1:30 and spent hours checking the mikveh and telling us what tikkunim had to be made with the mikveh. It was done, and Baruch Hashem, there were no more tragedies happening in this town. Harav Marlow also took care of our Mechidas Chometz. I was one of the last people to come from New Jersey on Erev Pesach to Crown Heights, and I was told that before he would conclude the deal with the Goy in Erev Pesach, he would always ask, was Carelbach here yet? And if the answer was yes, he would say, okay, let's go ahead with the Mechidas Chometz. There was one time that I received a phone call from a friend, a family of our friends. I had the head of the state police in New Jersey, who was a Goy, had passed away. He knew me very well, and after he died, his children called me and said that his last wish was that I should perform his funeral. He wasn't a Yid, he was a Roman Catholic, he was an Irishman. And at first when I heard this, I was flustered. I did not know how to answer them, and they said, you don't understand. We have taken care of everything. We're actually going to have 2 funerals for our father. One will be with you. It will be in a chapel. There will be no religious symbols. There will be no other clergyman there but you. And after you finish your service, then we'll take him over to the Galuchim. I had never done this before. So I called Harav Marlow and I asked him what I should do. Am I permitted to do this funeral? Harav Marlow said, not only are you permitted, but you have to do the funeral. Darkei Shalom, you're required to do it. So I called the family and I told them that I would accept this honor. And so went by a few days. The night before the funeral, they called me to tell me that in addition to being the superintendent of state police, he was also a retired general of the United States Army. And he would be buried in his full uniform, with his boots, with a full military honor. And I realized then that the coffin would be open. I had never done such a thing, so it was late at night. I called Harav Marlow, and he was a man of few words, and I said, it's Carelbach. He said, yeah. I said into him, der Goy wird liegen anofene. Harav Marlow answered me with 2 words, guck nicht, and hung up the phone. Harav Marlow was truly a Rav among Rabbonim, a source of inspiration for all of Chabad, and for all the family of Shluchim, for Hakitzu v'radanu Sheikh Neyofar v'hu Beresham.
I'm just going to bring a short story of my what I had in person with Rabbi Marlow. So this happened after Chav Zayin Adar. I was looking into a house which happens to be 2 houses down from where I live now. And I wrote into the Rebbe that this house is now, nothing is moving with it. And I had another Hatzah for a house that's on President Street, if I should wait on this house or I should actually go for this other house. So Rabbi Groner came out and he said that the Rebbe said to wait for the house. So I was waiting. Gimel Tammuz came. After that, the house was getting all boarded up. And I asked Rabbi Marlow, I asked Rabbi Groner, what should I do? He told me, I don't know, ask the Rabbanim. So I went to Rabbi Marlow and I asked Rabbi Marlow what to do. And Rabbi Marlow told me that Rebbe said to wait. So wait. So I kept on waiting. A while later, there was, I used to live on Eastern Parkway between Kingston and Albany. So there was a store, an Arab store, grocery store, living on, the store was on Union and New York. So time to time when we ran out of something or they wanted a drink, we used to go to that store. So we went to that store and one day the guy comes to me, tells me, he says, by the way, there's a house for sale over here on New York Avenue. So I said, okay, so let me go. So I went to see the house and the house looked very nice. It's 2 houses down from where I was going to buy. So I went, I looked at it. The guy wanted then $230,000 for the house. So I didn't know what to do. Again, I went back to Rabbi Marlow and I asked Rabbi Marlow, what should I do? So Rabbi Marlow asked me several questions. He wanted to know, is this house in better condition? How is my financial situation? And I told him this is, the house is in a much better condition. My financial situation is, obviously, it's much better than. So he told me I should buy it. So I asked him, the Rav told me 2 years ago to wait on the other house, and now you're telling me to buy the house. The Rebbe said to wait. So he said, yeah. He told me, he says, this is what the Rebbe meant. And obviously when I started to negotiate about the house, a lot of interesting things, even the construction part, Mamash, I found somebody that did it. It was Mamash cheap. And more than that, the owner of the house, he wanted $230,000. And I told him I would like to pay $200,000. And as we were negotiating, he told me, he says, I have 2 people, he told me their names, that they're interested in buying the house, they're willing to pay $230,000. He said, but for some reason, he says, I want to sell it to you only. So let's make a deal, and we have it. So I told him, you know what, you want 230, I want 200, we'll go for 215. And that's it. He says, you know what, this is how it's going to be. I'm just going to relate another short story with Rabbi Marlow. It has to do with me personally. It's the 20th Yahrtzeit of Rabbi Marlow. So this was a little bit over a year after Rabbi Marlow passed away. My son was born, Yud Aleph Tishrei, and we were discussing, my wife really wanted to name him after the Rav Yehuda Kalman. I didn't have any other specific name to name my kids after. So I was thinking, but who am I? There's family, to start naming after the Rav. There's no family, they want to have maybe. And it was something that was going through my mind, yes, no. I actually made some phone calls to different members of the family, and they told me, no, it's okay. But I still didn't feel comfortable. And this has actually happened by the Wachnacht as I am sitting saying the Zohar, and I dozed off. And as I dozed off, I come and I see myself standing by the bris, and I'm holding the name, I'm holding my son, and they say V'yikra Shmo B'Yisrael, and I said Yehuda Kalman, and then I wake up, and obviously this was the sign that this should be the name. So I want to just say that, we all know the bittul, the anava, everything that Harav Marlow had, respect the Rebbe, and the general tziyur of having the inyan of bittul, we saw very much by Rabbi Marlow. So in that schutz, we should all be zeicha, and we should learn from that, and we should be able to be pile on ourselves this inyan of the bittul, and obviously we should be zeicha to these galus of the Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach, and through that we will be reunited with Rabbi Marlow.
My first memories of Rabbi Marlow, alav shalom, take me back over 50 years, 55 years ago, when Rav Marlow was Aram in the Lubavitch Yeshiva on Bedford Avenue. I personally was never in his class because I came to the yeshiva in a higher class, but I remember mainly the Friday nights in 770. I'm talking about Tavshin Chavot, Tavshin Chazayin, and later, the early Lamids. Rabbi Marlow used to come Friday night to 770, about Litbenchen time. He always had a talazekel in his hand, carrying a talazekel. But the talazekel was full of svarim. Mostly Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch and Beis Yosef, Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe, other halachas svarim. And he would sit down. I remember clearly it was those benches that are under the Rebbe's Farbrengen table. He would sit at the end of the bench close to the table, and then he would sit down and begin to learn. Open up a few svarim and begin to learn. This could have been during the winters, 4:30, 4:45. And he would be in the same position for 4 or 5, maybe even 6 hours straight, looking in the svarim, learning from the svarim, hasmoda. That's not easy we don't see so often. A masmid, he would sit and learn straight 4 or 5 or 6 hours. Friday night there was davening. After davening, we went home to eat Suda Shabbos. Bochum would stay around a little bit longer. Some would stay daven a little bit longer. Chassidus, they would go later, either to the dormitory to eat or to our home. You could come back to 770 after Suda Shabbos. In the winter, 9:30, 10. In the summer, you can come back 10:30, 11. And Rabbi Marlow was in the same position that he was at 4:30, over the Sforim, looking at them, learning Ba'asmoda, something which left such a strong impact. If you followed him over the weeks, and you saw every week the same seder of learning 4, 5, 6 hours straight without a hefsek, Shulchan Aruch, you can really understand how he reaches the big levels of Bekios and Halacha. And this is something I even remember when his son, today Rabbi Yossi Marlow, that was Unzain, he used to ask him, Tati, when are we going home? He would say there, he came with him to shul. But his father continued. When he finished, he got up and he went. This could have been, like I said, 11 o'clock, even 11:30. This was something the way that this is how the earliest memories of mine of Rabbi Marlow with his hasmoda. We were able to notice that Rabbi Marlow, anova, big anova. Even though he was such a baki, even though he knew so well halacha, when you would come over to him and ask him a question, you would see another. You would think. He would ask you a number of questions to make sure that you pictured the question in the correct way, because sometimes when you ask a question to a Rav, you don't give all the details. And sometimes the Rav could paskin one way, but if you would have known another few details, he would have paskin another way. I remember, and I was sat a lot of times around there, and I was able to see the way people came over to him and asked him shaylas or chashabas or tzitzis or other things. And he would always ask a number of questions before he gave the answer. He wanted to make sure 100% that the shayla is clearly before him. It's clearly before him. And then he would think of a little bit, and he would give the answer. What you have to do. And it was always very novidik of things. He never, nothing boilet. He was giving the answer, paskening for you. There was nothing boilet. Everything was mitoch habitul, anova. It was also one of the tchunas of Rabbi Marlow they were able to see. Also, of course, his kashas to the Rebbe, that was able to all the years at the Fabrengens and so on, to be there, to be there on time, to interest himself afterwards. Even sometimes would speak over with chayzrim things that the Rebbe had said, wanted to make sure he understood it clearly, or he heard correctly, and so on. And Bechlal, in his kashas to the Rebbe, was a bittul to the Rebbe that the Ibergebenkeit to the Rebbe, what the Rebbe wants, what the Rebbe is asking from us to do, what we have to live up to, was always an integral part of his siach, where he talked with people, where he paskin for people, and so on and so forth. It's later, of course, I'm talking at least 20 years later, when he was chosen as a Rav, as the Rav of Crown Heights and the Beis Din of Crown Heights. There was definitely over the years we were able to see a certain kirov from the Rebbe to Rabbi Marlow. I personally noticed it a number of times when he went by for Keshel Bracha. There was a certain, my feeling, the way I saw it, I think that there was always like a hidden type of a smile in the Rebbe's face when he would walk by and take Keshel Bracha. Sometimes the Rebbe would give him a bottle, but there was a certain look on the Rebbe's face that there was a certain nachas ruach. This person walked by, there was a certain nachas ruach from the isnagus of Rabbi Marlow. First, on a personal level, I felt that's what I was seeing. And I watched it a number of times, and it happened again and again. That type of like a hidden smile that the Rebbe showed to him. And of course, later when he became the Rav, the Beis Din, the Kiruvim of the Rebbe, and the whole Ma'arechet of the Rabbonos that was set up then in Carelbach in 770 in Crown Heights, in Tafshin Memvav. The whole Ma'arechet was built around what does the Rebbe want from us? What does the Rebbe feel that we have to do? We have to be mashlim. The Rebbe had a number of tainas that 770 in the Crown Heights, the Shchunas Crown Heights, Siva Hashem Esabrocha. The Rabbonos is not beseder. A lot of things have to be fixed. A lot of it have to be amended. There has to be more of his askus in the Rabbonos and the Beis Din Crown Heights. It's clear, everybody who was around the Rebbe in those times, even years before, years afterwards, was able to see that it was Bereish Ma'yonov from the Rebbe was the Rabbonos in Crown Heights. That it should be beseder, the Kila should be able to feel that there's a Rabbonos and there's a Beis Din, and not all the shaylas and what you have to deal with all the developments around the Shechuna. So we were able to see by Rabbi Marlow, Asifas Rabbanim that we had, sometimes talking together, that the Rebbe, that he was involved, and his main goal was to make sure that Crown Heights is running according to where the Rebbe wants it to be. And those things that the Rebbe feel the Rabbanim have to accomplish, he wanted to accomplish them. We were able to see it in talks, you would see it in his actions. He was very, very active in it. But as I was saying, it was very much based on the discussions that he had, the Ibergebenkeit that he had to the Rebbe, that the Rabbonos and Crown Heights should be a mocker for Nachas Ruach from the Rebbe. He passed away at an early age, the Fierech, of course, but even afterwards, even after Rabbi Marlow passed away, all of a sudden, the guidelines and then his hashkah in the Rabbonos is something that stayed. And for later years afterwards, what he was spoiled in the Rabbanos in Crown Heights is something that stayed and something that Ad Yom has to continue to grow and so on. Daf Hofen, and certainly that his kashus come at the end of the 20th year of his Ptira. Certainly we have to learn how to give zechibur to a mesima, to a matara that the Rebbe wants. And again, as I said before, without any plitus, without any standing out or being different, whatever could be done in a way that he shouldn't be felt, but the Indian should be. That's the way he was misnaig. And these are the things that we have to learn. And let us hope that what he taught us and what we were able to learn from him in the Sug of the Rabbanos and the Bekiyas, as I said, in the Asmoda, you're able to see a Meiredik Asmoda, we're able to sit hours straight in the Rosh over the Sforim, looking and from learning and so on. This is something also, a Meiredik Atchuna that he had. These things should also be a ner, a light for the people around us. Let us hope that the Sofosha Devar, that all of the pulas that were done by him, done by the hemshich of the Rabbanos in Crown Heights now, the hemshich that's going, and will continue now after Rabbi Shrei Olav Hashalom passed away. Also, they have to be mechazik. I'm sure they'll find a way to be mechazik, the Rabbanos. And let us hope that we take it from Yad Mamish, right? There's Gaus Melech HaMoshiach, and we'll be the Sanhedrin. And that Sanhedrin will be in Tveria and come to Eretz Yisrael. These Rabbanim, the Rabbanim for the Rebbe Tavegishtal should be Rabbanim in the Sanhedrin, to be Meir Halacha under the guidance of the Rebbe, under the guidance in the Rosh of the Rebbe, and so on and so forth. We should be Zecher to the Melech, the Yofye, Techzene, Inenu, this Galos of Melech HaMoshiach, take it for the Yad Mamish.
When the Rebbe spoke Chavchas Nissan Tafshin and Aleph, and he spoke that he did everything he could, and so on and so forth, and took out Kent. The Rebbe also mentioned about the fact that we're in a Golus Pnimi. That it didn't help that we're still in a Golus Pnimi. When thinking about my Shver, Rabbi Marlow, the idea of Pnimi is something that I think is very important to highlight. There's a lot of things that could be said about him. He's smart, witty, Talmud Chacham Atzum, a very fair person, honest, and many other things. But about the pnimius of him, I think not everything is known because he was Hatz Nelachas. So there's just when you know when a person really has it in him. You know it from a Nisayan. Nisyanis are outside things that seem to be like a problem, but maybe not really an issue, but we perceive them to be a big issue. This is found when we're under attack in some form. For example, currently, where we had this COVID, and now the new shalshelis of it that's threatening the world and changing the world and bringing everybody to a new awareness and a new type of understanding what's important, what's not. It's during these times of nisyonos that a person is tested to find out what they're made out of and really what is their core. So just to think of, there are many stories, and I'm just going to share some personal experiences that I saw that still resonate with me. One of them was, you see a person's strength during an asayin, during a difficult time. He asked, at one point we went to different doctors to try to figure out what to do, and there was one particular doctor who was a big mumch in the area, and hopefully that he was going to have a different approach or whatever the case may be, and we went to go to see this doctor. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but during that time, like I said before, he had all this shiurim. Somebody asked the doctor to convince him that instead of staying up at night and sitting by the table and trying to do shiurim and only be able to learn a certain amount of time because he couldn't sit, and his eyes were hurting after a certain amount of time, this was after the first surgery, we wanted the doctor to give him quote-unquote advice, to tell him that he needs to sleep more and v'chulu v'chulu. So we spoke to the doctor, and this was sort of a setup that the doctor would tell him what medically he needs to do, and he should listen to the doctor, because you have to listen to the doctor. I was chosen at that time to go into the room together with him to make sure that we heard everything from the doctor and get the advice and to follow up and so on and so forth. The doctor started asking him a bunch of questions. And at one point, the doctor started to tell him, what's your schedule? What do you do? And he told him, and he started to question, so how's your night? How do you sleep? Do you do studies? And he was answering the questions one after another. But then it became obvious to him, very obvious to him, that this was a setup, and the doctor was asking questions just to tell him, no, you can't stay up like that a whole night. So at that point, when he realized what was going on, all of a sudden, I see that he's taking a checkbook. Now, we arranged everything with insurance and everything was arranged. Before that, he didn't take care of everything. He took out a checkbook, and he looked, I think, at the table. He saw the doctor's name, and then he asked the doctor, excuse me, how much do you charge for a session? And the doctor said, charge? No, they take care of it outside. There's no rabbi, there's no reason. And the doctor thought, oh, maybe he's not worth it, He's asking. Anyway, bottom line is, he wrote out the check for $180 or $175. I think it was $180. And he handed it to the doctor and thank you very much for your services, and got up and walked out. Okay, I followed him, and on the way out he said to me, don't you ever play such a trick on me, and if you do, I will not cooperate and I will not go to any doctors. My learning is my learning. When we come to medicine, that's a different story. Don't do this again. He was telling us clearly what was important and what was real for him. The last story that is a story that I've heard many times from different people, but the kud of the story is that when he believed in something, he stood up for it. And here he actually stood up for it, Berel mamash. So it was the first Friday night after the surgery, and we were at NYU hospital, and some Bachram came in from Crown Heights to make a minyan for Friday night. So the place of doing the minyan was in the lobby, and there was like a waiting room in the lobby, which was actually quite a bit area from the room, and made the minyan. And he came in. It was very difficult for him to come in, to walk from the room till this place, and he sat down on a couch. And it was during the Chadaidi that they were singing, and somebody was rushing the chazan to do it quickly. It shouldn't take a lot of time. And there was also people who were from a maternity ward. There was some Chassidim. I think there was one Satmar Chassid and another type of Chassid who were there for a Mazel Tov. They were on the same floor, so they came to the minyan as well. When it came to L'Chadaidi, towards the end, and they started to sing the Yechi, so the Bacher who was davening for Ahmed was either told to, just do it quickly, and they did not dance around the bimah, which at that time in 770, that was the thing that was going on. Everybody would dance around the bimah and sing Yechi. When my shver saw what happened, He was sitting there. It was a very weak state. He didn't say anything except for the fact he said, please, he showed or said, please pick me up. And he was lifted up and he started to walk around a little table that was there, like with magazines, like a little coffee table. And the Bachram continued and realized what was going on. And the Bachram started to sing Yechi. And he sang Yechi. He went around a few times, and even the Satmar and the other Chassid, whoever else was there, joined in. After he finished, he sat down, and he was actually so weak that by Shemona Esrei he did not get up. He was not able to get up. And after finishing davening, we walked back to the room, and being that he overexerted himself during this whole thing, he asked to go to sleep, and he went to sleep a little bit. And then a few hours later, he woke up, and we came to the room to make Kiddush. He asked, what were we afraid of? And that the people that were merachik the people, you saw the Satmar Chassid and the other one, they enjoyed. They didn't just stand there, they actually joined in. So he says, sometimes we're afraid of our own things and we stop doing what we need to get done. So in bottom line, it's very important, I think, to mention this, is because many times we look around and we try to figure out what is the right thing to do based on what other people are doing or not doing. And he was an Ish Emes, and what he did is what he knew was right, and there were many areas where he stood up for them. These are just a few examples, personal examples of the story. So hopefully in these nisyonos that we have now, we should be able to stand up to the nisyonos and understand what it means to be a chassid and what it means to datzos sekent and to go out of the Golus Pnimi and to be zeicher to the Gula Mitzvah Shlema right now, without any other menias or kovim or problems that we've been experiencing the last few months. It's about time.
I had the zechus to be a student of Rabbi Marlow's, and the first thing that I recall was that he was a baki in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. How do I know this? Because very often in the middle of the class, he would ask the class to farher him, to open up a Shulchan Aruch and ask him to begin verbatim to read word for word of the Alter Rebbe. And he would begin to read, and sometimes he would get stuck on a word, and he would say, "Thank you very much," close the Shulchan Aruch, and the next morning he came back to class and he asked us to test him again, and then he would know it fluently. And then we asked, can we randomly choose any part of the Shulchan Aruch and ask you? And he said yes, and we would. We'd pick up different simanim, different chalakim, and he would be able to read and say the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch by heart, word for word. Number two, he was a big chassid of the Rebbe, a big mekusher. He would learn sichos of the Rebbe in class, and you saw a tremendous love and dedication. But this really became very apparent when the Rebbe spoke about Simchas Beis HaShoeva, to dance all night during the holiday of Sukkot. And every night you saw Rabbi Marlow standing, dancing all night long. Younger people came for an hour, older people came for a half an hour, and yet Rabbi Marlow was there all night long, fulfilling the Rebbe's mission and fulfilling the Rebbe's request that you dance all night long throughout the nights of Simchas Beis HaShoeva. Another interesting thing was that when the Parsha of the week came to Parshas Mishpatim, rather than starting in the morning with the learning of Gemara, he would ask all of us to get a Chumash and open up the Parsha of Mishpatim and to read all the psukim with Rashis. He believed that this was integral to the learning of all the Yeshivish Masechtas, because these are the verses that the Gemara bases upon, and therefore he wanted us to know and see inside the actual sequel of events and the literal psukim word by word and how Rashi interpreted it. and through knowing this, you would have a better understanding of the Gemara itself. He was also a very Hasidic Yid. He would go to mikveh every morning. Downstairs in ULY on Ocean Parkway there was a mikveh, but it wasn't so sophisticated. Every day the water was taken out and the next morning put back in. Sometimes the water was very, very hot and not each person was able to jump in or go into the mikveh. Yet regardless how hot the mikveh was, he would go into the mikveh. He was determined to go into mikveh before davening. He was also very sharp-witted and he had a good sense of humor. To give one example, there was a student in our class whose father worked in the matzah bakery. And so he would say, before he called upon him to say the Gemara, he would say, someone whose father needs dough for a living, let him say the Gemara. And he would turn to the boy and said, Omener. So the point is, every person's father needs dough for a living. But he made it very real and very humorous. I am sure that he is in the heavens today and he is storming the heavens, requesting brachis for his family and his students that learned through him, and most importantly, giving a psak din that the time has come for Mashiach to reveal himself and to take us out of Galus now.
When I came to learn in yeshiva in New York, he was teaching at that time in the Mesivta. I came into Zal, and I wasn't part of his class. But first of all, to see such a great Talmid Chacham teaching young boys Pashat Gemara was something that made a huge impression on me. I couldn't believe that you could take such a person and give him a class of young kids to waste his time. Surely he realized that this is the chinuch, that it's part of his shlichus, and he did it mamish b'leiv nefesh. I actually didn't see it myself, but I remember my grandfather telling me many times that what impressed him the most was Erev Yom Kippur, which is the day that everybody knows is the busiest day of the year. Everybody's running, going here, going there, the Seudas, Tviles, Achone, Minche, the Rebbe's Bracha after Minche, the Rebbe's Bracha before Kol Nidre. And Rabbi Marlow used to sit in a corner and learn Masechta Yuma. Poshet, you saw a Yid that was preparing for Yom Kippur. How was his preparation? Sitting and learning Masechta Yuma. My grandfather saw it a few times, and every time again he used to come back and be pilus. How do you find such a Yid that Erev Yom Kippur, with all the humul tumul, what is he busy with? Learning Masechta Yuma. We all remember his speeches, his vertelach, his even kvetches, but everything was always mamish beloshin tzora. Every word was thought out, not an extra word, bekitzur, but with the whole tamsis. And to share with you a few situations where I was there, B'shas Ma'aser, I asked him, and he gave me answers. I mean, many of the answers that he gave, I'm sure are known, but I'll tell you 3 instances where I actually heard this psak din, which made an interesting impression again on me. Number 1, I remember asking him, I wasn't me asking, somebody else was standing there and asked him, if you daven shachris on Friday after Yahrtzeit, are you supposed to say tachnun or not? So I remember his answer was, or you daven shachris and you say tachnus, or you don't daven shachris. If you say that it's after Yahrtzeit and that's why you don't want to say tachnun, then you have to daven twice mincha. If you want to daven shachris, then daven shachris, and of course say tachnun. Another answer that I think it's very applicable for today is, remember there was a fire in Adar HaTorah, and this was Friday night, and Shabbos morning, one of the Bochrim that was there, a friend of mine, came in 770, was also tumult. Should he say Birchas HaGemel or not? And he asked different people, nobody could answer him, until I remember I was standing next to Rabbi Marlow, and I told him, Rabbi Marlow is this. He went over to him and he asked him, and right away on the spot he told him, of course you have to daven, let's say Birchas HaGemel. The last thing that I want to share with you for now is when I came to Russia the first time. This was in 87, and I was here. Actually, this was already the second time. When I came and I was here in the summer, and at that time was the white nights in St. Petersburg. It means that throughout the whole night you see light, never gets dark. And I didn't know when would Shabbos be over. And I remember I called them up on Thursday night. I told them that I understand that here there's no Aleis HaShachar, there's practically even, there's no such thing as, telling when is day and when is night. So what am I supposed to do? When is Shabbos over? And he told me then that I should try to keep Shabbos until I see the nets. In other words, would mean probably 3-4 o'clock in the morning. I should wait till I see the nets, and that's when I could make Havdalah, Ma'ariv and Havdalah, and Shabbos is over. I know that no question that he had, surely, with always ready answers. He knew Shulchan Aruch inside out, as I mentioned before. But not only did he know Shulchan Aruch, he knew how to apply it in a day-to-day situation for each one of us. Surely that his Talmidim and I think the Hemshech, what we see today in Crown Heights, the Rabbonim and everything that's continuing, is surely following in his footsteps, trying to bring down Halacha, the Daledama Shel Halacha, and it should be take a Hemshech that Kol Hashem Halacha says. Again, Chassidus explains the Maila is Dvar Havaya Zu Halacha, that should be Nimshach from the highest level till Asiyah Gashmis, till Ma'aser Bepeil. Should be Zeichetake, should be the Isgalus of Dvar Havaya, taken from Yad Mamish.
So what comes to mind is the message would be, don't be distracted by Dvarim Shel Mabekach. Don't allow trivial matters to be a hindrance. The way my father would live his life would be being consistent, and also in addition to being consistent, he would increase, he would add. We know the known Haidah from the Rebbe when it comes to Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, especially when Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh coincide. There's a special lesson of Tmid and Kisidron, Shabbos representing the sun, the consistency of the sun, the ongoing, consistent part of Ma'aser Bereishis, and Rosh Chodesh representing the moon, which always increases. So Shabbos is something that you have to ongoingly have, and have shiurim, and daven with the minyan, and do certain things that are kahalocha without deviating. And then you have Rosh Chodesh representing increasing and adding. So what I recall, for instance, is even when times were a little challenging, and there were din Torahs, and sometimes din Torahs were a little lengthy and complex, and they would end at 1 o'clock in the morning. Nevertheless, after the din Torah, it didn't end. My father would open a sefer, would open his Gemara, would open something, and finish the shir of the day, or the shiurim of the day. Didn't end then. It's late. It has to be done. It has to be accomplished. Regardless, it doesn't have to come easy. It has to be done. There has to be Kabbalah soil, and Kabbalah soil he definitely had. Besides using seichel, which he definitely had, he also had a lot of Kabbalah soil, and that was the secret of his success to a very large degree. He also didn't care to be a darshan, to speak. They say that Rabbonim and those who give drashas find it rather challenging to do tshuva or to be inspired. Because whenever they hear something inspirational, they think, this is something I could share for Yenim. This is something I'm going to inspire him with, while they themselves don't internalize it. My father was a panimi. My father enjoyed listening to people who there was something to listen to, and he would internalize it and increase in his Avodas Hashem. Every once in a while we discovered new chumras, new hidurim. He wasn't a fartike mensch, like the Rebbe said regarding the Levana. Sometimes when the Levana reaches Kaim Asir of Ashlemusa, when it reaches completion, so what do we learn now? Now the Levana could start diminishing. What do we learn? So the Rebbe says, the Levana reached Kaim Asir of Ashlemusa, so a person reaches his Avodah and he did it in a complete fashion. So here he gets a patchaf and pleitze, he gets a pat in the back, and he says, you're finished, you're a fartike. But my father was never a fartike. He never considered himself finished and complete. He always looked for more hidurim and more chumras and more hiskashrus, and he didn't allow the various different distractions to get in the way. Just an example of how my father didn't look for the easy way out, and he had more hidurim. Erev Pesach, when it came to Tainis B'choides, he would make a siyam, because he was a B'choir, he was a Ben Yochid, and he would also fast. He wouldn't start the Seder, the first one of the entire Crown Heights, and he would fast. As a smoker, he wouldn't smoke the entire Pesach because of Chshash d'Chshash. Wasn't easy at all. Didn't look for easy way out. For some to learn Masechta Shvuos, the Chassam Sofer says you learn Masechta Shvuos because there are Memtes Dafim, there are 49 Dafim. So my father, in addition to learning Masechta Soita, did Masechta Shvuos as well. There are many other examples that we're not going to spend the time doing now. But the message is, regardless of the situation, of the various different challenges, remain focused, remain mekusher. Certain things don't make sense. It's complicated. More Kabbalah soil is required. More work is required. So be it. It's less popular. So be it. Sometimes sacrificing something for the truth, even though it decreases in popularity, is was manzich, what's required. And this is definitely something we saw by my father. B'chlal, my father would learn, and he would know a lot of things. When you learn and you know things al pi Torah, it gives you a whole different level of confidence and strength and ambition to achieve and accomplish. Similarly, and needless to say, when it comes to learning the Rebbe Siches, the Rebbe's Maimorim, in particular in Yoni Geula Mashiach, it certainly gives one the knowledge, the confidence, the emunah, the clarity to go ahead with matters, even if they would ordinarily make less sense, be not as popular. If you have the backing of Torah, if you have the backing of the Rebbe, if you have the backing of Shulchan Aruch, and you have the backing of his kashrus, all of this is something that allows a person to do something without getting distracted by inyonim, by dvarim shel mabikach, by little tedious hindrances. This is something that we could learn from my father's focus. This is certainly a message that he would want us to part with.
The only organization, as far as I know, that memorializes Rabbi Marlow's Zikaron is Yeshivas Erev Yehuda Kalman. After Rabbi Marlow passed away 20 years ago, Yeshivas Erev, we adopted his name because he was the Isha Halacha and Isha Torah. And Yeshivas Erev is to teach Kinderlach, Yiddish Kinderlach, the Rebbe's Kinderlach, to learn Torah, to have Avas HaTorah, to be Mekusharim to the Rebbe, to be Yirei Shemayim. Yeshivas Erev is an organization that's backed by Igud Menahale Yeshivas. That's Rabbi Eli Turen from Beis Rivka, Rabbi Yosef Simpson from Lubavitch Yeshiva, and Hershel Lustig, myself. And we put this organization on Rabbi Marlow's name. Besides, we have 10 locations where children come every single night to learn, about 250 Talmidim. Right now, obviously, it's on Zoom, but in good times, Bezras Hashem, going back to them soon, we have about 250 Talmidim. There are various programs. There's a Mishnayis program, Mishnayis B'fnim program, there's a Mishnayis Volpeh program, there's Tanya Volpeh, there's the Mitzvahs, the Tayag Mitzvahs program, and the Madrichim help the Talmidim do their homework. They also learn the chavrusa. They talk to them. There are children who have various issues to discuss. This is a program that goes on every single day of the week, 5 days a week, because Erev Shabbos, of course, not. And learning Torah Le'ilu Nishmas and L'schus Harav Marlow.
Und die Signen von dem Rebbe, das angeheben Leinen zu Minche, steht für Ato de Zaves Bnei Yisrael. Jeder eine weiß, was für Ato heißt.
Das ist ein Nedel am Moi. Die Kosten von am Moi, so war es non Kosten. Die Kosten von Anfang non Kosten, so ein bisschen an die.
Punkt, die man nicht hat, mit den Teilen zu fehlen, in den Sehen Schabbos, und deswegen hat Abraham Rebbe machen Schollen. Nach ein paar Vorschläge für Korre, und das Geld zum Rebbe noch alle haben nicht.
After serving as Rav of the community tirelessly for many years, Rabbi Marlow tragically passed away on Chof Sivan Tov Samach at the age of 68. In his last public address on Yud Shevat Tov Samach at the Kinos HaYovel, marking 50 years of the Rebbe Melech HaMoshiach's leadership, Rabbi Marlow spoke strongly about the importance of educating children with complete emunah in the coming of Mashiach and the Rebbe's identity as Mashiach. Rabbi Marlow concluded his remarks by saying how great the neshamos must be of those who have such emunah without having ever seen the Rebbe with their own eyes.
Der Rebbe schreibt in dem Maimer al Kaponim, wir haben es die alle in Yonim, als dies Loyes Borech dir betachtenim, und kein Schumpnies, und Loyes Borech, und betachtenim darf gesuchen in Yonim Neilim, und warum Schutim, von Chinuch mit Kinder, hat gesagt in Amerika, was man lässt Mechanach sein Kinder, jetzt ist gar Zeit, was man darf Mechanach sein die Kinder, mit der Munde der Heira, im Beis Moshiach und Zeus, wer das ist, wer ist während der. Also der, in seinen Kelem Teherim, auf dem, in heutigen Zeiten ist es da nicht Schammes gewesen. Wann, was haben sie gesehen, was sie begashmi sind da in 70, in Siderene. Wann was nicht, und von deswegen dem Reis und die Amune Pschute, was sie haben, muss man sagen, dass sie nicht Schammes gewesen. Weil die sicher bringen da Lamata in einen Eifen Apostel, die Gehula Amides war schlimmer. Amen, kein Jürgen.